it's cultivating the skills to be with feeling, right? To have a nervous system that can let a feeling wash through you like a wave, and for you to know that if grief comes, you're not going to drown in it forever. It's going to go away, right? It's going to move through you. That actually maybe that could be a beautiful opening for you. It may bring you into a deeper experience of divinity, God, life. And so stopping bracing around the emotional experience that comes through, right? And allowing it to come through.
Alexandra Roxo, welcome to Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love those words. Passion, love, pursuit. It's like, yeah, give it to me.
Yeah, exactly. Just give me all the goodness, right? Yes. So I'm so excited. I kind of want to just jump in the deep end. So I received your book, as I was mentioning, Dare to Feel. This is your newest book, The Transformational Path of the Heart. So we're going to dive into why do we need to feel more and what's the importance of this. And so talking about feeling, so I know so many are so afraid to feel their feelings. And this has been something that was programmed from potentially a very young age. So what is the consequence if we don't allow ourselves to be fully seen and feel the full spectrum of our emotions that we all experience? Like, what would this repression not allow ourselves? What would it get in the way of in our personal lives specifically?
Great question. And I love that you use the word repression, because on some level, I think a lot of us feel super liberated. And not everybody would say that, but emotionally, like I think a lot of people are cultivating emotional intelligence and self awareness in a way that perhaps our grandparents or great or grandparents didn't have the time or the resources or just like the knowledge that that was even possible. And so I think it's great that a lot of us are cultivating the skills for even just acknowledging or recognizing what we're feeling in a moment. That recognition is a really important part of our own individual paths, right? And depending on the context that we grew up within, family, society, religion, ethnicity, there are all these factors that have their own imposition and indoctrination around emotions, around feeling, around expression. So then the second piece would be expression. So it's like, even some of us who are becoming more adept at understanding what we're feeling in our bodies at any given moment, and sort of being able to track ourselves and consider how the nervous system is involved, how potentially any patterns of trauma or stress are present. But then the next question is, how do we bring that into the relational field? How do we then engage with each other and bring that expression forward in a way that's like, not like a child having a tantrum, right? Not just like, I'm fucking mad right now, but also not like, I'm an adult who's got it together. I'm fine. I'm great. It's cool. I'll handle it later. I'm just going to namaste the pain away, baby. Like that's not going to work either, right? So there is a second part of the feeling conversation, which is not just feel your feelings, which is its own skill, right? But also because you have to ask yourself in that regard, are these my feelings? How long have I been feeling it? Is the feeling here in the present moment, or is it related to my past, right? It's actually
Right.
quite multidimensional, layered. And then how do I bring this through artfully into intimacy and relationship, right? And so kind of like my book is like, dare to feel first. First, you got to dare to feel what's there and get to know it and recognize it, and maybe consider why it's there, how long it's there, etc. And then the transformational path of the heart is how you bring that through into vulnerable intimacy, how you let your expression be an invitation to love or to the erotic, or into just greater relationship and vulnerable depth, right? So there is, I think that's the second part of the conversation that I go into in my book, is like the expression, the artful expression, the alchemy of the feeling. All of that can be either a big part of our spiritual and healing paths, or it's kind of like something that we kind of push aside, we try to control, we try to compartmentalize.
Yeah, absolutely. And why do you find, or how do you find in the work and the people you work with, what's the common thing you see to why people avoid their emotions, either numb, avoid, repress, distract, all the things? What's the common thing you're seeing?
Yeah, I think a lot of women, I work with mainly women, and I think a lot of women, it is the cultural indoctrination more than anything. It's, I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want to look like a train wreck. I don't want to seem like I'm a problem woman, because like then I might not attract the guy if I look like I'm just a hot mess, right? Um, I need to maintain some form of I've got it together, right? That is a huge indoctrination for a lot of women. So the idea of letting kind of one's heart unravel at the seams a bit and kind of ooze into a little bit of mess can feel really scary for a lot of women. So I see a lot of that control, that kind of compartmentalization, and the fear associated with like, will I be loved?
Right.
If I don't quote unquote have my shit together, right? And that's like, those are the moments where we quote unquote don't have our shit together, are the moments of vulnerability where the walls come down. So when I see women come into, let's say, my coaching practice, who are like, oh shit, I actually have this facade, this mask that I'm really soft and open and vulnerable. But when it comes to letting myself be seen on a deeper level, I don't. I hold it back. I keep my mess to myself, because I think it's not lovable. And so that would be one part of that what I see. And then what I like to support women in specifically, though I've supported some couples together as well, but is then how do I artfully use that vulnerable expression that can feel like a mess, though I don't think it's a mess? How do I then artfully bring that into relationship as something beautiful, right? Not just spilling it all over the place, but bringing that forward. And so that can be, I think I have these moments in my own partnership where it's like, I could just be like, oh, I've got it. I am self sufficient. I can hold myself. I can, figure it out. And then I kind of take away an opportunity for intimacy with my partner, for him to
Mm.
hold my heart or to sort of love me in a particular kind of way, than if I let myself just, oh, I'm just feeling so sad right now, without the like, but it's cool. I've got it figured out and I'm just going to go have a run, right? So that is the curse of the modern woman. It's kind of like over self sufficiency,
Right.
at times, which can be a block to intimacy.
I think what you just pulled out right there is so, so key that I think a lot of people listening right now could see them doing that in their moments, especially in their relationships. So that was a really good example of how women potentially will suppress their emotions so that they have it all together and that they could handle it. And I watched this happen over the past week when I was at a mastermind, a woman expressing vulnerably something she's working through, and she suddenly started to tear up and cry, and she's like, oh no, she like turned away from it because she was like, oh, I don't want to seem like an emotional mess. Like she was starting to be vulnerable, but then she's like, oh no, and I think a lot of women will tend to do that. They'll shy away from having those cries even in an intimate setting. And then of course, men as well don't want to be seen crying. So, what would you say to women that are feeling that way or have experienced that? What would you tell them to do instead, potentially, or help them ease into being vulnerable?
Yeah. Well, first, it's brave, so, pat yourself on the back. But I think noticing what you do when you cry around other people is very interesting. And I've been doing work for a long time with people. And when I see a woman start crying, there's like a variety of things. There's hiding the face, there's kind of fanning the tears away, So
Right.
there's like, oh, I just, then there's like, oh. Then there's just like the okay, so noticing what do you do when you start crying in front of another? Just noticing first, right? Interesting. I'm fanning my face. Interesting. I'm like trying to wipe the tears away really fast, right? Get rid of the evidence. And then the second piece would be stopping. Anytime we want to interrupt a pattern, is stopping, taking a breath, and then softening. Could I let my hands fall? Could I let the tear just roll down my cheek? Could I take a deep breath here instead of trying to be like, or could I stop before the apology reaches my lips so I don't apologize for the tears? Um, so that pattern interrupt always starts with self-awareness, right? We're not aware until we're aware, right? That we
Right.
are picking our face or that we're fanning our tears or that we're saying all the time or whatever. We're not aware until either somebody tells us
Hmm.
or we see it in someone else. And we go, "Oh shit, that's what it sounds like when I do like." I do a lot of likes because I
I
grew up in the
hate
'90s.
when I hear myself saying like all the time, I'm like, "Ugh." Because we notice it in other people, right? And then we're like,
Totally.
oh, I do that too.
Exactly. So it's the same, right? With any pattern we want to interrupt, we recognize it in someone else or someone points it out in us. And this is where our partners hopefully are able to artfully draw us into more awareness in a way, not like, "Hey, Erica, you're always fanning your tears. What's up with that girl?" But like, "My love, you don't have to get rid of the tears. Like, I'm okay. I'm here for it." So it'd be great if we have those people around us in our life that encourage us, right, into that transformational state of breaking the pattern.
And so, based on that, bringing that awareness, which is always the first step of any change. So, once we have that awareness and then start to notice, like you said, be curious of those patterns that we do, how can we then move through, like moving through those emotions so that we could break these patterns? And again, it doesn't happen overnight, but how could we start to lean into the uncomfortableness of moving through those patterns that we're noticing? Like, what would be a way to break up with those patterns, if you want to say?
Mm. Well, I would say the pattern itself would be whatever you're doing to avoid an experience, an emotional experience, or the discomfort that may be there. So the emotional experience itself, that isn't necessarily a pattern, right? It's like just have emotional experiences, they come and go. So on one hand, whatever the mask is on the experience is the thing that you're wanting to shift, right?
Mm.
Even if that was, say, an avoidant, like every time I feel sad, I scroll or I reach for chocolate or whatever. Um, that the pattern break there would be, oh, I'm noticing that every time I feel sad, I do this, right? Or when someone asks me how I'm doing, I only say, like, I'm great and oh my gosh, everything is fabulous and blah, blah, blah. So on the other side, once that mask or that thing is kind of pulled off and you're like, oh shit, like this is me actually just feeling and being uncomfortable feeling things, then it's cultivating the skills to be with feeling, right? to
Mhm.
to have a nervous system that can let a feeling wash through you like a wave, and for you to know that if grief comes, you're not going to drown in it forever. It's going to go away, right? It's going to move through you. That actually maybe that could be a beautiful opening for you. It may bring you into a deeper experience of divinity, God, life. And so stopping bracing around the emotional experience that comes through, right? And allowing it to come through. And on the flip side, not being possessed by it, where it's just like you're always sad because you're just feeling, quote unquote, all my feelings, and I just happen to be always angry. So then
Yeah.
that would be itself a pattern, right? That you'd be like, oh, seems like maybe more of a habit than a truth that's happening in my body. Um, so it becomes this practice of discernment and noticing and being current with what's happening in your heart, which takes courage because it's a moment to moment practice.
Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard this saying, you must feel to heal. And
Yeah.
so really, I mean, that's what I believe your whole book is about, is like, how can you move through these feelings with grace and acceptance, and also knowing that this is everybody's experience of life, is this array of emotions that we're all supposed to experience, but how could we lean more into it? So what would be some practices beside the be discerning and sit with your emotions? What would be some practical practices you give onto your clients to move through these difficult emotions?
Well, first, just learn how to move through not difficult emotions easily and express them, right? So, not just feel them or notice them, but actually express them. Notice, are you laughing when you want to laugh? Are you crying when you want to cry, right? Like, I'm not saying like a big difficult, but just in general, right? It's like, am I having n- natural emotional experiences move through my body on a day to day basis? And what does that look like? Does it look like I get an email from a friend saying, I'm coming to visit, or I'm taking you out of town, and I get to go, oh, this is so exciting, right? Like, oh my gosh, yeah. Do I let myself have an expression, or am I just kind of like, cool, right? Like, awesome. And I just move on to the next thing, right? So, first, we want to recognize, where am I at with feeling the things happening in my intimacy, in my relationships, and then how do I express? So when a friend tells me, and then this sounds very elementary, but it's like when a friend tells me like, "Oh, I had a great Valentine's Day with my partner." Am I allowing myself to have a responsiveness where my heart is touched, right, by what they're saying? Maybe not everything is touching, but in some way, am I responding from a felt sense to my life? Good, bad, ugly. First that. Then we can recognize when states of big discomfort come: breakup, heartbreak, loss, divorce, whatever. Then it's like, okay, I have an emotional intelligence. I know how to express. I know how to cry when I've had a bad day. So I know how to feel when someone I love has passed, right? Because we can't just jump into that. I mean, some people, that's how they wake up and
Yeah.
get into the body because something big happens and it shakes them into this kind of breakdown experience. But ideally, we are responding to each other, and that is intimacy, right? We're responding to each other. We're saying, "Oh my gosh, my love, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you." We're feeling each other. Ouch, that kind of hurt my feelings. So we're feeling each other and we're learning vulnerable expression, human to human, not withholding truths, but not spilling truths in a way that is like a bulldozer, right? So we're becoming emotionally attuned to each other with healthy boundaries. We're learning our nervous system regulation. Um, and learning how to resource ourselves, all of this. So when the big moments of big, deep, dark, intense feeling come, we actually are like, oh, we're cool, right? It's like exercise. Before you say run a 5 mile run, you're going to run half a mile, 1 mile. You're going to build up to that. So ideally, we would have been taught that as kids, but I don't think
Right.
most of us were, right? We were taught the
Yeah.
opposite, which is like, don't be quiet. That's too much laughter. That's too much crying, right?
What has been your experience to bring you to write such a book as about feelings and to express yourself and not numb, suppress, avoid?
Well, I think for me, it is has been coming into relationship with my
Mm.
partner. And I've dated tons of people and I've fallen in love tons of people this life. I'm super lucky that way. Not tons, but a good handful. I feel very blessed. However, in a lot of relationships, I was bringing all kinds of dysfunctional patterns in with so much love, bless my heart. But at a certain point, I was like, I want the real deal, deep partnership. Where am I avoiding intimacy? Where am I avoiding something from my past? Where am I avoiding telling the truth? Where am I in codependent patterning? Where am I kind of masking and saying everything's fine, everything's fabulous? So for me, I had to go on my own deep journey into my own heart and look at all of my relations, all of my relationships. Like, where am I not showing up fully? Where am I hiding? And that led me to kind of look back into my life, into some of the moments where, say, I abandoned a deeply felt sense because I was hungry for love and got hurt, or where I felt completely unsafe in my body in a deep freeze and couldn't feel, or let's say had to have a really hard conversation with someone that I love. And so these stories around how we heal relational intimacy, they felt like for me important, for my own journey, and then to inspire people to consider them in their own lives, because we can look at our healing like a very kind of left brain, in this kind of analytical way of like, okay, if I do this nervous system regulation and I do this therapeutic technique. But what I bring in my work is this, I call it a very like old school feminine approach of using storytelling and
Mm.
using emotion to access your heart as the reader. So I could kind of just give you all the scientific background, but nah, I'll let other people do that. So I want to come into your body, Erica, through your heart. I want to tell you about the time that I abandoned my truth because the guy was really hot. And then I found myself hurting and alone. And then I guarantee you that you have your own version of that story that's going
Mhm.
to pop up in your head and your heart. And then we're in an intimate dialogue, you and me, even though you're the reader at home. You're like, wow, I feel seen because I also wanted love so bad that I abandoned myself, right? Or I also, you know, um pretended that I was okay for years, but I really had an eating disorder or whatever it is. And so part of writing this book is like a declaration and an excavation of like what I needed to face
Mhm.
in order to come into deep intimacy that feels secure and healthy finally. There's no too late
Mm.
though, people. Okay. So whoever's listening, I don't care how old you are, it's not too late for us. So
And
yeah.
you also have a 3-month-old daughter, which is
Yes,
amazing that you even have time to podcast with such a young little bean to take care
I
of.
know. Yeah, I like come and run and do a podcast for an hour, and then I run out and back and hang out with her for a few hours. And then, my partner and I swap off and on. And one of us is always with her, if not both of us, at this phase, which is lovely. It won't always be like that. But for now, we're
Yeah.
like absolutely in love with her. So we just both want to hang out with her a lot.
So precious. So let me ask you, being a new mother, I just feel called to ask you this. Being a new mother, I imagine a lot of mothers in general, because you're taking care of this precious being, you want to make sure your daughter, your son you're able to be there for their feelings. Do you feel things have transformed a little bit since you became a mother, or what has changed? And what do you see commonly in mothers? Are they neglecting their feelings more because they have this other thing to
Mhm.
take care of? And now that's the priority.
Absolutely. I mean, in the 3 months, 3.5 months that I've been a mama, I mean, I guess while she was in my belly, I was already sort of. But I have definitely felt this potential for mothers to abandon their own needs on behalf of the
Mhm.
family, and that kind of martyrdom that can happen. And how mothers tend to be under resourced. And it varies from family to family, culture to culture, etc. But I do think it's a commonality that many mothers are under resourced. And so I already knew, and part of this is like becoming a mother in your late 30s versus early 20s. I have learned to take care of myself in a particular kind of way that I wouldn't have if I had a baby when I was 25.
Right.
Now I know what I need. Do I
Right.
always have the wherewithal to say what I need? No. Do I know what I need? Yes. Is it still hard in times because she needs something? Absolutely. Do her needs come first? Pretty much. But that being said, it's been a beautiful practice for me to practice saying what I need, and
Hmm.
mostly with my partner, because she
Yeah.
can't help me with my needs. But my partner and I can. We can have a dialogue, and I can say, "Wow, I'm noticing that I really need to exercise, and like, can we make a plan so that I have a little bit more time in my schedule to do that, or whatever it is." Now, on the question you asked about feeling and deep emotions and that kind of thing, it's interesting because I had my first kind of cry the other day, just around her, not a big cry, but I shed a few tears. And she is too young to understand at this point. But I was thinking, I will have to explain it to her when she's old enough to
Hmm.
understand. I'll have to say, and without cluing her into whatever I'm deeply in pain about, because if it's something that's an adult conversation, I don't want
Right.
her to have to grow up too fast by knowing too much about it, because that happened to me as a child,
Mm.
and I became an adult very quickly, and I became a kind of confidant to my mother. But that will be a whole nother practice to not have a full meltdown in front of my child, so that they don't feel like they have to help me to fix me or make me feel better, but also not to totally abandon my emotional experience. And so I think that would, practically speaking, look like telling my partner, my love, I'm having a meltdown. I need to go to the bathroom, take
Yeah.
15, 20, right? Um, and then I think if you're caretaking alone or caregiving alone, um, then you would have to sort of try to keep yourself as regulated as possible and kind of table it until later. And I think that's part of being a parent. Ideally, you don't want to table it forever. You want
Right.
to just know you're holding something, and then say when your partner gets home, or if you're a single mom, when you have next time you have a babysitter or something like that, giving yourself space to process, so that you don't just keep forgetting that you have some stuff that you're carrying around that you didn't get to feel or process. That can look as simple as, okay, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to go call one of my best friends and
Hmm.
say, I'm losing my shit today. I love you. I don't need anything from you, but I just need to tell
That's all
somebody,
I
right?
needed to say. Yeah.
Right. Or
Yeah.
it can look like, you having a great call with your therapist, coach, or mentor that you know is coming in 3 days. And so you're like, okay, I know that's coming. I'm going to hold some stuff till then. Right. But it is, I would say, have fun crying and screaming and being free. If you're going to have kids, like, enjoy it, because it's so different. It's so different. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
everything is different now.
Of of course. Actually, that brings me to asking, I'm sure a lot of people have heard spiritual bypassing, and that's kind of the opposite of, feeling your range of emotions. So, what would you say about this? Because I know this is very common, like the personal development community, everything's fine and positive. Can you share why this is the opposite of healing and how the only way out is through?
Yeah. I went through a phase like that too, and I actually talk about it in my book. And there's a story about it when I was in my, kind of first spiritual awakening phase, when I was probably 20 or 19. I totally use spirituality as a mask to be like, great, I can love and light my way, which on some level it's true. On an absolute level, everything is beautiful and fine, right? But it's not. People are dying, there's wars happening, there's disease, like, so all of this is happening simultaneously on this planet. And I think that it can be a real detriment to spiritual people to not keep oneself tuned in to the realities at hand. On the flip side, you can become so tuned in that you lose yourself and that you're constantly feeling grief for all of the pain happening on the
Mm.
planet, and then it's completely overwhelming and etc. Right? So we don't want to flood ourselves that in that kind of way. So it's really finding a regulated space where we can feel some of the pain, right? And it starts in our families. Honestly, I haven't I don't think anyone who can't tune in to things that have happened in their lineage, their ancestry, that are difficult, right? And it's like that is the beginning place to start in your family, in your home. You can't, if you're bypassing that and just saying, no, everything was fabulous, then I don't think we're being completely honest, because on a really basic level, like our ancestors, a lot of us were part of colonization and the genocide of indigenous peoples and living in a place where they either owned slaves or were so I can we can get real nitty gritty with the fact that most of us carry deep suffering in our bones and in our DNA. A lot of people carry intergenerational trauma, epigenetics, uh, and on a spiritual level, maybe not, right? On a spiritual level, we may not. We may have just incarnated into the US for our first time, and you're like, wait, I wasn't even around for slavery. It's like, okay, sure, maybe you weren't incarnated here during that time, but the body you're in now is made of the flesh and DNA of people who were on this land, who stole this land, etc. And I don't need to get into a huge political conversation, but when spiritual people are kind of, and I say that like air quotes, spiritual people, um, are bypassing some of that, or the inequities that exist, then I say you go get your ass out there doing some service. If you are a spiritual
Mm.
person and you're not pouring part of your income or your heart or your time into service, then I don't want nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? Because then you're just hoarding that internal resource. You're hoarding the resource of love, of your own. Sorry, sounds like a crazy car going by. I don't
Oh,
know if you can
that's
hear
okay.
that. Oh, hold on one second. Pause. Um, but so then you're hoarding, right? You're hoarding all that spiritual merit that you're gaining or that clarity. And so the opposite of spiritual bypass would be tuning into what's true, still keeping, one foot in the everything is possible, it's possible for healing, etc., but then pouring your heart into the healing, pouring your time into the healing, even if it's just giving money, if that's what you have, or giving time, or both. So I think that's important for us to remember. And maybe it's not just spiritual people, but people that are on a path of growth. When
Mm.
you're not just doing it all for you, you're doing it to share with the world.
Absolutely. So, talking about your book a little bit more as far as the path of the heart, because I want to touch on that a little bit. What do you feel are the biggest heart wounds that you commonly see? And what does it look like to be living in a path from your heart?
Yeah. So some of the biggest heart wounds, and I'll call them spiritual wounds, they're not physical wounds, from the spiritual heart and the emotional heart. One of them we've touched on, repression, which is a big one. Rejection is another big
Mm.
one. Abandonment, guilt, shame. Did I miss one? Okay, repression,
Those are huge
rejection.
ones, though,
Yeah.
that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Yes.
Isolation.
Mm.
So, right. And so everybody has their own kind of flavor. And then there's like the pattern, the behavioral patterns would be more like, avoidance or numbness or that kind of thing. I don't think those are the wounds. I think those are the consequences of wounds.
Mhm.
But some of the, just a simple rejection, well, nothing is simple, but a rejection from a caregiver, let's say as a child, can create a big imprint, right? If one of your caregivers is like, you're not doing enough, or you never get it right, or what's wrong with you, or whatever,
Right.
or just simply not present. That in itself is a rejection. And that imprint can be really lasting, especially for a youthful heart, an innocent heart. And that innocent heart then carries the wound of rejection, and it may create behavioral patterns to adapt. If I love more, maybe people will love me. If I shine more and I'm sparkly and lovable, maybe people will love me, right? So everybody's narrative is so different around
Yeah.
any of those core wounds, but those are and I think with the core wounds, they're relational in the heart space, so they have been quote unquote inflicted, right? Or they've been gifted. That's a terrible way to think of it, I mean, because it doesn't feel like that, but they've
Right.
been given to us. They aren't things that we were born with.
So if somebody doesn't have your book yet, they're going to, of course, buy it in the show notes. uh, what would be some, like maybe three things you could leave the listeners with today to
Yeah.
start their path,
Well, one thing I want
connecting
to
more
say is,
deeply with their heart?
yeah, I want to say it's not all heavy, right? I just gave some heavy stuff. And I want you to know, if you're still listening, you're like, oh my God, this is too much. No, but
Yeah.
that it's not all heavy, because here's the thing: when we face the stuff that's mucky, behind it is more love, more connection,
So true.
liberation of the heart. And that's what the book is about. And that's what my work is about. And I imagine your work is about. Let's get more liberated together. Let's liberate our experience. Let's open these hearts. Let's create more vulnerable connection. Let's create more honesty together. And that can be really fun and silly and sexy and all of that. And so, you know, we have to do the kind of like, okay, I gotta see what's here, I gotta acknowledge the wounds, I gotta like take a responsibility, take inventory. But
Yeah.
then guess what, I get to live more alive, more impassioned, closer to my soul. I get to live more true, and that's a part of it. And so that's on the other side, and that's part of this transformational path of the heart. So the things that can start you there are: have a hard conversation with those you love when you don't want to. Not with everybody, but the people that are in your intimate circle. If somebody hurts you, or if you feel hurt, right? Maybe they didn't intend to hurt you. Lean in, share. I feel hurt. I feel confused. Can we talk about it, right? So lean into hard conversations with those you love. Um, Start just taking inventory about how you're feeling, and if you're able to bring it across the bridge to the people you love,
Mm.
right? Bringing your joy into the room, bringing your laughter, your tears, whatever it is, into the room, out of your head, out of your little special container, and into the lives around you. That can start really small. You stub your toe and you go, ouch, right? Or you hear something funny and you're like, ah, right? And so how can you just practice bringing a little bit more of your heart into the room?
Mm.
Similarly, with sound, you can also do that with your body. How is your body transmitting your emotion, your feeling, your state of being, or not, right? Is it kind of locked up? Is it always doing the same thing? And those are parts of the embodiment part of the conversation: how we bring our emotions through in the expression of sound or the way we move our body. But in the space of intimacy, too, it's really also acknowledging. Another thing you can do, so far I've given you, have hard conversations when you don't want to, make
Hmm.
sound, pull it through your body, and then feel what you yearn for, what you desire from your heart. Is it deeper
Mm.
love? Is it, more spiritual love? Is it more eroticism? Like, what do you yearn for? And what feels vulnerable to you about that yearning, right? So that's something to track in your life. Like, what am I yearning for from my heart? Like,
Mm.
I want to feel more seen by my partner. Okay, cool. I want to feel closer to my friends. Okay, cool. I want to heal with my parent, so noticing what that is. You don't have to make a to-do list about how to do it tomorrow, but it's just tracking what your heart is yearning for.
Mm,
Yeah.
so good. So good. Those are all tangible things to at least start to take inventory of and practice. So I thank you for that. So, where can people learn more about you and jump into your world? I know you have a membership that just opened up as well.
Yeah, so I have a community. We do all kinds of practices around this. So if you're like, "Oh my God, I never want to do this." Come on over. Or if you're like, "Oh my God, this sounds good. I need to open my heart. I want to become more embodied and I want to touch my yearning and I want to become better in my relationships and in my creative life, my sensual life," then come on in. My membership is called Radical Awakenings, and
Mm,
we're open for new members until March 1st. So I don't
okay.
know exactly when the podcast is coming out.
I have to
You know.
check.
Okay,
but if
great.
but
But
regardless,
if it's
everything will be in
after
the
March
show notes.
1st, message me. I'll
Perfect.
get you in. Okay. Since I don't know
There
when the
we go.
podcast is coming out. Also, you can find me on Instagram at Alexandra Roxo. My first book, Fuck Like a Goddess, is out in the world. If you haven't read that one, grab that one too. But grab Dare to Feel now. This one is the deep, juicy, rich one. Fuck Like a Goddess is the little sister, the maiden phase. Um,
So
and
great.
I also see clients one on one in my coaching practice, and all the other stuff's on my website. So it's all there, alexandraroxo.com.
Amazing. Thank you for that. So, all that goodness will be in the show notes. And let me ask you my last question that I ask all my guests. So, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned along your journey, that you just feel this piece of wisdom you need to shout out to the world, what would it be and why?
Hmm. Hmm. Don't give up on love. Don't give up on yourself. But also, don't compromise or settle beyond your heart's knowing. If you know that there's something that you're yearning for so deeply in love, then hold that yearning like a candle, a torch in a dark hallway. Stay with whatever it is that your heart desires and don't give up. And if you start to feel those boogeymen and ghosts and demons coming in saying, "You're never going to have it and you're not good enough and something's wrong with you," then hold that candle higher. Then make some roars and some loud noises and call in your sisters and stay true and stay clear with your heart because you will be met. I do believe that. I believe we each deserve deep love and we can
Oh,
have it.
so beautifully said. That's such a great closing message. I love that. And like you said, it's never too late. So I love everything you shared today. And it to live in the path of leading with your heart and to be, fully expressed in all our emotions. That is life. That is connection. We all yearn for that. So how could we lean more into that and move through it is really key. And so thank you for sharing all the wisdom today and all your work you do. Appreciate you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much, Alexandra.
Thank you for having me.